Hey folks, I'm back with round 7 from this series of recaps from the 2024 National Open, which took place in early June in Las Vegas, Nevada. So at this point, I'm not doing great in the tournament. I've got 2.5 points out of 6 after losing the last game, which was very unfortunate. But what to do? 3 rounds left to play. I want to have a good finish. And yeah, every game is a learning experience. So, I continue to just try and put up some good chess on the board. So round 7, I'm playing against another junior by the name of Vishwa Nanuganda, 2051 FIDE, again, higher USCF. And once again, I started with knight f3, and we got d5. In the last game as white, I played g3. In the 2 earlier games I had this position, I played e3. This game, I went back to the classic e3 poison. I forget exactly why I decided to choose this one versus g3. I think I just felt like playing this another time. And yeah, once again, we get a pretty thematic structure out of the opening, early b3, bishop to b2. I've explained the idea of this opening, I think, many times on YouTube so far, but the point is we're looking for some structure we can play. We usually delay d4 until it's more convenient later. This stops all kinds of checks on the diagonal and gives white some more flexibility, and doesn't give black an easy life in terms of what to do, because black has many setups, but of course they have to pick one. So castles, knight c3, c5. This is all very normal. C takes d5, and I've had many games with e takes d5 in this position, which is a very normal move. I'd probably go d4 here, and if black takes, knight takes d4, we get a very classic isolated queen pawn position that's very usual for this line. Instead, my opponent took with the knight, and this is also very playable. And we get a different structure here. This one is actually almost like a reverse Sicilian, like a reverse open Sicilian, if you can imagine. Instead of the pawn being on e5 or on e4, it's on e3. And black has played almost like a Taimanov Khan type of setup. I'm going to play a3 at some point to control the b4 square. And this actually is a pretty fun opening. White often wants to play like bishop d3 in this position, hit the pawn, and then shoot the king side forward like h4, g4. So knight c6, I went a3, just stopping any kind of knight before right away. It's not the only move in the position, but I believe it's quite playable here. And here, black played bishop to d7. As far as I remembered, b6 was kind of like the main move, and I believe white then follows up with h4. And the idea here is to threaten to go knight to g5, hitting h7, trying to provoke a weakness with g6, and then playing for the attack there, like bishop d3, eventually looking for h5 ideas, knight c4, and so on. And yeah, white can get some really nice attacking chances here. There's a great game, I believe it was Nepomniachtchi against Mamedyarov from the Olympiad a couple years ago. I hope I got the players right, but I think it was those two. Maybe might have been Nepo versus Bakro, now that I'm thinking about it. Nepo was definitely on the white side of this, but yeah, definitely a very nice game. Maybe not this exact position, but very similar. And yeah, that's about all I knew, or as far as I remember during the game. But here black plays bishop to d7, and I felt like maybe his idea is to play a quick rook to c8 and some kind of knight b4, knight d4 tactic, looking for play on the c file, which could be kind of annoying, because if white is eventually looking to castle queenside, then of course I want to watch out for any knight to b4s. And so at this point I'm on my own. I started thinking here, and eventually I decide to take on d5, with the idea being that black now can't take with the queen, has to take with the pawn, and then I can play d4 here and try to get black into one of these isolated queen pawn positions. So I don't think this is actually the best. I checked afterwards, and apparently there is some theory here. A couple of games where white played bishop to d3. One game by Vincent Keimer, who's a big expert in these systems. And actually, this is probably a much more interesting way to play it. The idea that we're hitting the pawn, black probably goes h6, and then the follow-up is to play g4. And then rook to g1, g5, and maybe h4 if needed. And yeah, it seems like white gets a very fun attacking position. So if I had this again, this is probably what I would shoot for. But okay, I took d4, takes, knight takes d4. And yeah, during the game, I thought this is reasonable, and the only drawback is that I'm a little bit behind in development here, but if I can get the pieces out, then I can just start playing against the pawn. I was pretty happy about those prospects. Turns out it's not that special for white. Black could have gone like rook to c8, hitting the queen. Let's say queen to d2 I probably would have played, and then queen to b6. And then the idea is to try to take on d4 and take on b3 and just snag a pawn. And I don't really want to take on c6 here because then that improves black structure quite a bit. B takes c6. And actually underdeveloped here, I can even get in trouble with b4 and black has ideas of c5, a5, and so on. So this could be, yeah, especially c5. This could be really tricky for white. So on rook c8, queen d2, queen b6, I mean, I would probably go bishop to d3. And during the game, I think I just wasn't super concerned about giving up a pawn like this. But yeah, Engine says black can definitely get away with it, play b6, and maybe black is better here. Although white definitely would have at least some compensation for the pawn. So yeah, definitely not the best opening from me, but bishop f6 was played, queen to d2, black trades on d4, bishop takes d4, and bishop to e6. And I kind of felt like, yeah, if I can just get one or two tempi in this position, I can get my pieces out, everything will be fine. I felt like bishop e6 really wasn't the most active move black could play. I thought like bishop f5 is much more to the point, looking for like rook to c8, rook to c2, this kind of thing. So after bishop e6, bishop e2, I feel like now white develops and gets a pretty comfortable game. Rook c8, I went bishop f3. I think the engine actually likes b4 here, starting with this one, rook d8 or something, and then rook fd1, queen to b2. So actually keeping the bishop on e2 for some time to cover the c4 square and allowing white to gain some space on the queen side. So maybe that was a better way to play things because I went bishop f3, rook d8, rook to d1, b6, h3, h6, and a4. And I'm just trying to very, very slowly like improve the position, maybe create a second weakness on the queen side here. I would love to trade off the bishops and just leave heavy pieces on the board, try to pile up on the pawn. But yeah, a lot of work to be done for white to win this. Maybe I should have played like queen to b2, either on this move or on the previous move, forcing black to take. Rook takes d4. Wasn't sure about queen f6 here. With the threat bishop takes h3, I probably go king h2. And yeah, the engine thinks black is fine, but maybe this would have been a better way to play, like forcing the dark squared bishops off early. And now I can build up with bring the rook to the center. I think the ideal setup would be to like get the queen behind the rooks and just pile up on this pawn. And that's kind of the main winning plan that I'm aiming for, is to pile up on the pawn, force black to spend all their resources defending it, and then win the pawn tactically, either with b4 hitting the rook or with e4 using the pin on the d file. You know, it's kind of like the long-term strategic play in these positions. But very, very difficult to achieve if black is solid. So a4, here black trades, queen takes d4, queen c5, and now I didn't really want to queen trade, but it's also hard to avoid. If I go queen d2, black can kind of chase me down with queen to c3, and same thing on queen to b2. And I ended up playing this move a5, and actually it's kind of funny, you know, like I was mainly expecting black to take on d4, and then I would take with the rook, and then I thought I'm doing well here. If black plays b5, for example, I can either play a6, I have rook ad1 and e4 ideas. I thought here actually I'm getting some chances with white, b4, and things are looking good. But yeah, I totally forgot that black can just like take the pawn first and not take on d4 and just take the pawn. Like I'm not taking the pawn back, at least not right away. So it ends up being not so bad, but this definitely wasn't exactly the plan I had in mind. Regardless, I don't have a ton of great moves that I can play either, because black is ready to just trade, go rook to c5, and black is very, very solid here. So anyways, a5 takes, I drop back queen to d2, pretending like this is part of the plan, winning back the pawn like this. Thankfully, I'm still able to get the pawn back, but now we're trading pawns off, and it actually feels like black is getting much closer to a draw. So queen b4, I take here, queen b3, and rook takes a7. So now queenside has been completely liquidated, and we're just left with this d-pawn as one weakness. It's not really enough to win the game normally, and even if I do win the pawn, a lot of the resulting endgames will be drawn, especially rook and 4 versus rook and 3 usually is a draw, and at this point that's like the best that I can get. It's like a drawn rook endgame with one extra pawn. Where okay, I'll squeeze it and maybe we can try to win it, but we're not even there yet. So I wasn't feeling great about my situation, but of course, that said, I still felt like, I'm the stronger player here. I can put some pressure and it's not the easiest position to hang on for black. Although objectively, I understood, it must be very, very drawish. So rook c2, queen d4, of course, rook c4, I mainly want to keep pieces on the board, trying to avoid trades. So I go queen to e5, rook a4. Now I played rook e7. And here's where actually I started looking for some chances, especially connected with the exchange sacrifice, rook takes e6. Because I felt like if I can take this one, get queen takes e6 check, and then take the d5 pawn as well, I thought actually I would have good winning chances in that kind of situation with the bishop and 2 pawns against the rook. Objectively, I have no idea, like the evaluation of all these different positions, like bishop and 2 pawns against the rook, but in practice, it feels very unpleasant for black because white has these 2 passed pawns. The bishop is very nice. I have a lot of squares, a lot of diagonals. My king is safe. Black's king is going to be weaker with only 2 pawns. And it just felt like any endgame actually is kind of nice for white because I always have this plan of just like pushing the pawns forward, and marching them forward with the bishop, using the queen and bishop to combine against threats on the king. If you can imagine, all the light squares are going to be weak, and so bishop g4, bishop f5 ideas. So I started dreaming about some exchange sacrifices here. Black goes rook e4. Tactical move. If I take with the bishop, then queen takes d1 check, and then I lose the piece, and so I'd be losing the game here. And I could go queen takes e4, so I was hoping this would work, because if de4, rook takes d8, I get 2 rooks for the queen and a pawn. And so this endgame, I presumed, should be close to winning for white, if not outright winning. 2 rooks and a pawn is big material advantage. But the problem is after queen takes e4, black can throw in queen takes d1. Nice tactic. And so I have to take back. Black gets the queen back. And I thought about this endgame for 2 seconds, but it's I think it's pretty drawish. King f8 here is an accurate move, hitting the rook, and then black can defend the pawn a bunch of ways on e4. So rook e4, I go queen c7, hitting the rook, rook c8, and now queen back to d6. And here, yeah, it's definitely where I started feeling hopeful because, okay, I'm not threatening the rook yet because this one is still hanging with check, but I'm ready to move the rook away at some point, and then the rook on e4 will hang. And then the bishop on e6 is possibly takeable, especially now that the rook on c8 is hanging. Okay, and now it might not even be a sacrifice. Black has to be careful about rook e6, queen e6, and winning the rook. So it's a little bit tricky for black. I move the rook, and then this is hanging, and this is possibly hanging as well. And here black goes rook back to c4, which definitely surprised me because now it just allows me to take and basically get exactly the exchange sacrifice position that I wanted, where I get the bishop and 2 pawns for the rook, much safer king, ideas of fighting, giving mate on the light squares, and of course a couple of strong pawns in the center as well. So again, objectively, I didn't know during the game what the evaluation was at this point. I imagined that black is probably defending. I didn't think it's like, oh, just winning or anything, but it did feel like it's not going to be easy for black to hold this position, especially compared to, well, we had a couple moves earlier where it's like black is just so solid, only has to defend one weakness and so on. So at least we got something tricky. So rook c4 I didn't like for my opponent. I thought rook f8 he should play. And okay, at some point this rook will have to move, but then he won't have to worry so much about the sacrifice on e6, or at least he'll be in better position. But honestly, with the rook on e4, I'm not sure if black can really avoid it long term. But at least I thought this is kind of the way to go. So okay, we get this. I take, queen takes here, queen a4 is played, and yeah, it's an interesting situation. I wasn't sure how to play it. My instinct actually was to trade rooks because at first glance it feels like I want to keep the rooks on the board so I can go like rook to d7 and keep another attacking piece. But then I realized if I trade one pair of rooks off the board, then it's actually very hard for black to really generate any serious counterplay, like giving checks to my king, without opening up their own back rank. And if black's back rank is exposed, then I always have ideas of like giving check and the bishop comes in. The queen and bishop can be very annoying to the king. And that means that black would have to stay passive with one rook on the back rank, and then I can just slowly start bringing up my pawn and again, combine that with threats against the king. So I wasn't sure how to organize a rook trade. I basically just knew I have to kind of maneuver around a little bit, try to improve my pieces, not blunder anything, and look for my chance. So I go queen f5. Not with any huge intentions here. Okay, I want queen g6, bishop g4, bishop f5, but I'm sure yeah, black has a lot of time to deal with this. So queen c2, hitting the queen. Now on queen a5. And here I think I was basically just like trying to grind a little bit. At this point, I've got about 27 minutes. My opponent has 11 minutes. I still think the position is probably close to equal, and the longer the game goes, the harder it will be to defend. So, I just want to pose like a couple of problems here and there, see how my opponent reacts, then go back, and basically get my opponent low on the clock and hope he blunders. I feel like that's kind of the strategy here. All while, improving the position, of course, trying to improve the position, make threats, all that good stuff. But long story short, trying to get the opponent low on the clock, so it's harder and harder for them to defend. Lo and behold, the blunder actually came quite quickly as black played queen c3 here, which surprisingly is a losing move, I think. Instead, I think just like rook f8, for example, would have been fine. So with queen a5, I was looking for rook to d8 check. Again, with this intention of trading rooks, where I thought I have kind of a good endgame with queen and bishop. So rook f8 kind of anticipates that. So then on rook d8, black has some checks. And yeah, definitely it's not as good of a version for white as it could be. Not sure if black really has a way to avoid this one. But queen c3, the problem is I go rook d8 check. And if king h7, there's queen f5 check. And after g6, I don't have any queen checks because of queen g7, but there's rook d7 check. And black is losing here. Now king h8, queen takes g6. Black has a check, my king moves, and black is getting mated, so it's all over. So after rook d8 check, black has to trade. But now queen takes, king h7. And I don't have an immediate way of getting to this diagonal. Like I thought about bishop g4, but then rook takes g4 and queen e1 check. And queen takes f2. I mean, white's still a pawn up, but okay, I didn't want to go into this endgame. I wanted to look for better. And bishop d5 is much stronger because I'm hitting the rook and I'm threatening to go after black's king with queen to g8, which is, yeah, very, very dangerous. I mean, bishop g8 actually I think is a little bit more annoying for black if the king goes in the corner. We have this classic bishop f7 and queen g8 mate. So this would force the king to come out, and then it's very, very dangerous. The queen and bishop and then pawns as well will start to get involved. So at this point, I think it's, yeah, really dangerous for black. If rook to c8, for example, then bishop e4 check I can play, and black has to go g6. And I believe I was thinking queen d7 check, and the key thing here is if queen g7, then I can, well, can take the rook, but I can also like take this one first, and then so it's like it's everything. Yeah, the point is if I take the rook, then at least there's queen a1, queen e5, but here I'm getting like a third pawn and taking the rook, and so that's completely over. So yeah, this is just lost, and if king h8, then bishop takes g6, and just 3 pawns and the bishop for white. This is just way too much. Black can go for the endgame with check and queen c7, so at least black doesn't get mated here. But bishop and 3 pawns, this should be winning. g4, h4. I mean, 3 pawns is way too much. And importantly, after queen a1 check, king h2. So I did have to calculate this line. Queen e5 check. Well, he does have f4 with tempo. Because g3 is not as good, then black is covering the bishop e4. So f4, very important move, hitting the queen, keeping the attack on the rook. And now if queen takes e3, then forget which one I wanted in the game, whether it was bishop check or queen check. I think it was bishop check. I actually think this was calculated till mate. Queen d6, and yeah, if here we have this one, which was a nice mate. And if the king goes to h5, then I think bishop f7 is leading to mates. King h4, and then we've got this one, and okay, it's really bad. Actually, okay, I think here there's a nice mate, queen e7, which is very, very cute. This I didn't see during the game, but okay, that would have been a nice nice way to finish. So yeah, that's not working for black. And then after rook takes f4, kind of important detail here, queen g8 check, forcing the king out, and now e takes f4. And the point here is that after takes, I can go g3, and if the queen was still on d8, so if I hadn't given this check, then there would be queen d2 check here, and I wouldn't be able to go bishop to g2 because the queen would still be hanging on d8. Here I can go bishop to g2 and white's just a piece up and game is over. So last little detail here. So once again, if I didn't give this check, if I take, then this one, technically white can actually win by coming out with the king, but I would love to play g3, but queen d2 check here, actually black would have a perpetual by not letting me off the first 2 ranks, because I can never block with my bishop as long as the queen is on the d file. Okay, yeah, so queen g8, last little detail, and then I took, and black resigned because he realized he's running out of checks and just down a piece. So I won this one, you know, not the smoothest game for sure. Like I wasn't better out at the opening or really had anything special, but okay, I put some pressure. I found the chance with the exchange sacrifice and we did what we had to do. Interestingly enough, you know, for those wondering, the engine thinks that this position is like dead drawn and black is holding in like many different ways. Like I don't know, I still think it's very difficult from a practical point of view, but yeah. You know, it's one of those positions where, yeah, the engine will hold it, but for humans, I don't know, it's tough. You hold it until you blunder, and then all of a sudden you lose it. And that's that's how it goes. So, yeah, kind of interesting game, definitely from on the technical side, but I'll take it. And yeah, this brought me back to an even score. After this one, I'd be on 3.5 out of 7 with 2 rounds left to play. So, thank you once again for watching these recaps, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Take care.